And get started. Thank you for joining us, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks again for joining us. Do we have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All of those in favor of adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. All seven. Okay, and can we get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All of those in favor, please raise your hand. And we got all seven again. Okay, and Board of Ed acknowledgements. Does anyone have anything to share?
I was just going to make a general reminder that this Saturday is the SOS Serving Our Students event. So because of the time of the board meeting, I'll take any opportunity to remind people of that either need to come and get help or that want to come and help and volunteer. Even though I think volunteers should be looking pretty good this year, but there's always room for more if anybody wants to come. As of today, there's 180 people already registered. So
Wonderful.
typical average attendance is around 200, and some things we only have 200 of. So I think it just shows the need and the reason why we do the SOS.
How many?
I saw your signs. That's
How
awesome.
many
Yes.
do you typically get above registration?
How many probably would you say like the day of walking in?
I mean, it varies from year to year. You never
Yeah.
know. It's pretty fast and furious for those 2
Yeah.
hours.
Right.
So we actually, the registration while it's open now, we'll take it down, we'll close the online Wednesday at noon. So that just gives us a day and a half to do our planning and get the list ready. But we do still take walk-ins, so nobody's turned away. Now, they might only get there right at, it's 9 to 11, so it's first come, first served, quantity's limited, so encourage people to get there
Yeah.
early. But definitely, we always have room for walk-in, and even if we run out of things, we try to have those SOS resources, we try to refer them on. Like, for example, hygiene kits, pocket churches do those. If we run out of those, if there's any extra, we send them to schools. If we run out, during the year, they can get things through the Giving the Basics program. So we try to have other things, because, we don't want it to be a one and done, one-time event that
Right.
people miss. So
Right.
we try to have resources that we can refer them to. Just like we run out of backpacks, there's a few area churches that bring backpacks usually for August. So we always try to have other resources. but,
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
But not for everything, so.
Yeah, not all things,
Right.
just certain things, so. Anyway, this Saturday, always the third Saturday in July, we have pins and cups now, that always helps people remember when that is. That way volunteers and participants, everybody knows when it is, so. Third Saturday in July, it's this Saturday.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
I just mentioned, because I started walking, that Ms. Coates donated a MacBook to our
Yeah.
theater department for the lights and so forth, so that's very much appreciated. Very much appreciated.
Very much. Okay. Is that it for acknowledgements, I guess? Okay, so next up we have reorganization of the Board of Education. So we need to elect a new board president.
I nominate Amanda Gerken. I nominate Samantha.
I will second Amanda's nomination.
Okay.
I'll second Samantha's.
Okay, so then do we vote on each person?
Not to vote in the order that the motions were.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for Amanda for board president. All of those in favor, please raise your hands. So we've got 4.
Opposed.
And, okay, all of those opposed, please raise your hand. And 3.
So that's a majority.
That's the majority passing vote? Okay, so then do we not do the other vote?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys. Okay, so Amanda Gerken, congratulations as board president.
You're on,
Now
so
you're on.
before we rearrange,
Yeah.
you need to ask for nominations for a vice president.
Okay.
And then once we get a vice president named, then we'll play some
No
musical
seats.
chairs.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Okay, are there any nominations for vice president?
I nominate Sean Miller.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Okay.
Oh,
So-
sorry, that's
That's okay.
for you. Moved in second, all in favor?
Did you count?
3.
Okay. And then you have to ask for opposed.
Opposed?
You have to vote too.
Yeah. 4. Any new nominations for vice president?
I nominate Samantha.
Second.
Is it you and me?
Yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor? Four?
5.
5. Scott? Opposed? 2? Okay. Samantha, 5-2?
So to make this easier for today,
Mm-hmm.
can the two of you switch?
Yeah.
And then,
Yep.
we'll do some rearranging for,
Yeah.
for not, for next meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's here today.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm guessing then you're gonna ask for a motion second.
Okay.
Those are fine.
Okay, we need a motion and a second to approve the clerk Jenny as deputy clerk, Lorelai's as treasurer, and Jenny Myers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Yeah.
7?
Okay. And then I just have
Okay.
two, we'll talk about these, so.
Next up, Matt, for online enrollment.
Yeah, so this is just a public, another public, to let, I guess, public know that online enrollment has opened. So it opened on July the 7th, which was a Monday. It will go through, we advertise that it's through the 28th. Enrollment actually stays open, but during that window of time, we waive credit card fees for the enrollment process. The reason we put a back date on that is because that's when our people in our buildings start coming back, and we have to get schedules finalized and so forth. So we really push on trying to get all the enrollment to come in during that time. We will have some stragglers that come in after that, which we will work through. Buildings will help with that part of it, but just to let the public know that online enrollment is open, and we're talking about next school year.
That doesn't include like if adding money to lunch accounts, right? It's just for the enrollment?
Well, so you will go through that process, and for enrollment, I believe you have that option to do that.
Yeah, I think when you go to pay fees,
I tried to add it and I couldn't, so I just kind of assumed it was just the
I know
enrollment
the payment
part.
processor is all changing. I was looking, I don't know, Kyle, if you know anything about it. Jim Propey and Christina from my office are working on that.
Yeah,
So I know that it's changing. I have not done that in
Have
Kyle
been
yet, so I
down.
can't tell you.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I couldn't even find food service
Okay.
in general, so I just kind of assumed there was a change
Yeah,
in
part of
place.
that is changing, because it used to be, you could set up, like if you had a recurring payment through your
Right.
credit card or debit card, that's all changing, so you're gonna have to reset that up.
Gotcha.
I don't know where we're at on that. So
Okay.
if that isn't working, that would be the reason why.
Perfect, okay.
Did it let you pay fees though, just not food service?
It let me pay the fees and it waived the,
The convenience fees,
charge,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good.
I just
good.
couldn't do lunches.
And that would be, we can look.
We'll follow up on the others, but
Okay, Next up, Jimmy with preliminary budget presentation.
All right, thank you. Let me pull this up here, see if I've got my clicker working. I always stand strategically over here in front of Ryan.
Oh, he does move over here.
Shoot, I didn't see the camera bag this time. Yeah.
Believe it or not, I do think about that. What shirt was in the paper last year?
I'll put my drink over here, so that's a good action.
We love the local newspaper, and always appreciate Brian being here. So, now it's like, I gotta be careful what I wear, because we got the newspaper and then the live streaming too. Once it's recorded too, I gotta watch the jokes I tell, because they're maybe the same ones. So I think last year I might have started out saying that preliminary does not always mean brief or short, so I apologize about that, because there's a lot of information to cover tonight. But it will kind of set the stage for the budget season that we're in for tonight, and then for in August. So without further ado, we'll get started, because as I said, preliminary does not mean short necessarily, so hang with me. But board members, as I go through, just like in prior years in the past, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt and stop me, because sometimes it's more relevant when we're on that slide, or we can back up to it later too. So, all right, so I always start, because this preliminary information, the reason it's preliminary, it's not the full budget. The full budget is not that. What we're talking about tonight is tax levies and the levy part, because as we're going to go through here, that's the first real big step, is we have to tell the county clerk whether or not we're exceeding revenue neutral or not. So that statutory date is July 20th. So obviously the second Monday of July at that board meeting is when we take action on that. And then I will finish the budget. We have the preliminary, or not the preliminary, the budget review scheduled for Topeka. And then once it's all said and done, you'll see this later on the calendar, is when the legal notice will be in the newspaper. And then in August, we'll have the real budget hearing. Anyway, R&R is revenue neutral rate. That changed back in 2021. In some ways, it seems like long ago, and other times not. That changed how we do the budget process. It requires that a resolution be passed by the Board of Ed to levy property taxes that exceed revenue neutral to finance the budget. And I'll try to stay over here so you all can see. This is all online as well. The whole, well, it will be tomorrow. It will be posted on board docs under the public content so you can see it. And I'm sure you can catch the live stream recorded too. Anyway, these are some excerpts of it. Again, just kind of the highlights. None of this has changed. The county clerk tells us what our revenue neutral mill rates are, June 15th of each year. That's the statutory date anyway. And then nothing can be levied in excess of that without a resolution and all the hearing procedures. This again hasn't changed. 10 days before your budget hearing, which will be at our August board meeting, we have to publish the notice of the budget. And this again talks about exceeding revenue neutral on the website of our school district and in the newspaper. So of course, Miami County Republic is our official newspaper. It comes out once a week. It will be in the paper prior to that for that 10-day period. So again, as I mentioned already, on or before July 20th, we have to notify the county clerk of our intent to exceed revenue neutral or not. And if you're exceeding, you have to tell them the date, time, and location of your public hearing and the proposed tax rates. If you're exceeding revenue neutral, you have to hold that public hearing. You cannot have it before August 20th or after September 20th. That's because those taxpayer notices have to go out. So even though you tell them by July 20th, there's a 30-day for them to get the notices ready and mailed out to the taxpayers. You can have the revenue neutral hearing in conjunction with the budget hearing, and that's what we've done in the past. It can be all the same night. Excuse me. Majority vote has to approve exceeding revenue neutral if you're exceeding revenue neutral. If you don't comply with any section of it, then you may be subject to having to refund all that money back to your taxpayers. This is just the rest of it. Again, the dates of when it's due. And after the first 2 years, which we're there now, the clerk can bill anybody that needs to have the revenue neutral notice sent out. You can be assessed the costs associated with that. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later, but when you have to pay for that back to the county clerk for their mailing and expenses. If you're not exceeding revenue neutral,
The old budget date used to be August 25th, and now, and that was different if you're exceeding or not exceeding revenue neutral. Now that's changed. All budgets are due October 1st, whether you exceed or don't exceed. And that is a welcome change. So thanks, Samantha. We talked about that a lot. And my point in that was you had a shorter turnaround time if you were revenue neutral. And if that's the behavior you're wanting to incentivize, why do you punish the people by giving them less time to do their budget? So now it's the same, which makes life easier for us because we were revenue neutral last year. Not to let all the wind out of my sail, but this budget that we're presenting is revenue neutral as well. So that is welcomed extra time to get everything done. So we have to approve that again, like I said, tell the county by July 20th what we're going to do. If you don't notify them, then you can't exceed, you'll get the same money you got the prior year. So by default, if you do nothing, you're going to be revenue neutral. You have to tell them if you're wanting to exceed it. And the last note, because we do have a recreation commission the last few years, it's computed separately. That's part of our budget, but they are separate from us. They do their own hearing, they do their own revenue neutral calculation, and completely separate, although it flows through our budget. So again, the timelines, this is just old information, but a recap of every year. When that first changed, it tightened that timeline up because that July 20th was kind of a new number or a new date. And so because when your assessed value goes up, this was again back when this first came out, the KSDE put this out, and this is still true today. I mean, the new process and procedure will likely apply to most school districts because of that change and just increase in cost. We'll talk more about that later. But again, the budget we're talking about tonight meets the revenue neutral criteria. Just kind of a table format of the timelines. I'll speed through some of this. This is, again, the information. This is what now has changed. You can see this is updated April of 2025 to that October 1 date. It was August 25th if you're revenue neutral. So it gives you a whole extra month plus, same time as everybody else's budgets are due. Taxpayer notice is what we're talking about. So again, this is last year's because obviously those are getting ready to go out. This is one that I take and kind of dummy it up a little bit just to use for an example so it doesn't have anybody's personal information on it. This is the whole format. We'll kind of walk through it section by section. So again, the top part of it just tells your property information and it tells what property type it is. Is it residential, is it commercial, is it agricultural? What category does it fit in? Because that obviously makes a difference in how much the property is assessed. Then it has your prior year assessed value, current year assessed value, all the information specific to your property is in the middle of that. And then the middle section of that tells all the information about the tax rates. And so I went in again, took dollar amounts off of this one, but if they were in red, that was a decreased amount, and if they were in black, that was an increased amount. So you see Miami County was a decrease, recreation was a decrease, or revenue neutral, and then our 368s were revenue neutral and a decrease. So you'll see an example later of that. If you're not, and that's why ours say no hearing required because we were revenue neutral. You don't have to have an exceeding revenue neutral hearing when you're not exceeding revenue neutral. That'll be the same for this year. These that did exceed revenue neutral last year, City of Paola, that was their hearing date, and the actual notice that you'll be looking at showed the dollar amount increase, and same with the extension district. And the others, of course, as they indicate down below, I highlighted are 3. And ours are listed 3 times. Obviously, we do one budget. But this is the regular, and then you can see kind of it cuts off a little bit for space. But capital outlay, and then the bottom is, well, there's general fund. This top one actually would be local option budget, capital outlay, all other funds. You'll see that here in a little bit later. This was a summary that I did in my board report. This was on last year's tax statement. Again, it gives you the total in there so everybody can see this. I highlighted ours because last year we lowered our mill levy. So our mill levy was down 3%. Our revenue was down 1.67%. We lowered taxes by $194,000 and change last year. County was about $58,000, and you can see the others that were increases that were not revenue neutral. Or, as I would point out, that this shows in red, it's not even revenue neutral, it's revenue negative, because we lowered it. Neutral would be flat, but we actually lowered taxes last year. And we'll look at this year. Stealing all my own headlines. This was a letter that went out with the 2023 tax notice. I liked some of the information in there. talking about property taxes today, I think that's a good letter. We have a little bit of Franklin County too. I always remind people that. We have a little sliver of Franklin County in our district, so we get to deal with 2 counties. And so 2 different letters go out. This was actually the 2022 Franklin County tax letter, and it had like an FAQ in there, like, why would a taxing entity, school district, whomever, want to increase revenue? And talking about rising costs and things, to provide the same services or better, costs more. Everybody knows, and in your personal life as well, you experience that things go up every year. Very little stays the same, as you've seen here last month when we talked about property insurance and work comp insurance and the increasing costs. So I thought that was a good letter. I don't know if they've done that since, but now that I have it forever, it'll probably always be on the budget slide. This is our calendar. So I've got the budget review scheduled now, the actual formal one. The Code 99 and the paper I had kind of to be determined, probably, because here we are tonight. My guess is I'm going to publish, it'll be in the newspaper probably July 30th. That, because of course our paper comes out on Wednesdays, so it's 23rd or 30th. I think the 23rd is actually the budget review in Topeka, so it won't be that edition. It should be the 30th. That gives us more than enough time before the August meeting to meet the 10-day publication period. And again, we have till October 1st. Technically, we could do this in September, but why wait? Get it over with. And if there's any publication issues or if something's wrong, you got time to fix it. So, and this follows our timeline of doing that at the August board meeting. And we don't have to have that special August board meeting that we used to have the 4th Monday some years before this timing kind of changed. So again, that will be the meeting where we will approve the budget, assuming you approve being revenue neutral tonight, approving the publication in the newspaper, and then we'll have the hearing and you'll approve the LOB resolution that night, which you have to do again as a part of the budget meeting. And then October 1st is when it's all due. So again, property taxes is really what we're talking about tonight. We're only talking about the 4 levied funds. That's all the budget that's done. And those aren't done, but they're done enough to get the mill rates. Because it's really a quick turnaround to even get to this point now. By the time we get through budget closeout and the budget program comes out, it's a very tight timeline to get things ready for this meeting. But this is something that I put in there every year. And these, again, when this slides out there, the links will be clickable to the sources. So you can go out, because I kind of narrow this down to focus in on parts of this. So you can go to that website about property taxes, just like you can log in from the county and see all your information. If you live in the city of Paola, which I talk about city of Paola residents because obviously that covers the majority of our district. You could live out in the county and not pay city taxes. But if you're in the city limits of Paola, this is what your chart will look like. Regardless of your assessed value or anything else, your chart will be the exact same, no matter what kind of property it is. So it will show the part for USD368 of your total mill levy. So a city of Paola residents between the extension district, the county, the city, the state, the school, and the rec commission, you pay 128 mills. School district last year was 47.986 mills, and so 37.3% of your tax bill is for USD368. Again, that's city of Paola. If you live out in the county, you don't pay city tax, but you are going to pay county tax, so your percent's going to look a lot different. But again, it's kind of one of the, just because we are in the city of Paola. This, again, is information. The link is there for Miami County, the distribution of tax dollars. So I think this is kind of good information, not really directly related to the school budget per se, but it shows how much money in Miami County is generated for county taxes, 24 million and the percent. Now the school district is listed separately because the general fund and all other funds have different assessed values. So you have to add those two together. So again, that's about 45% of the total for schools. And this is, as I noted, all schools in Miami County. That $33-ish million doesn't come to Paola. That's all the schools that touch Miami County. More than just the main 3 you think of, and we'll see that a little bit later. All the schools that have a piece of Miami County, and that's the total tax revenue. So I thought that's just kind of helpful, keep it all in perspective. Again, same thing, just in a chart format, shows the percentage allocated by each entity. Again, the citation's on the top of that. This again, property tax, Kansas Department of Revenue has this document out there. It's a homeowner's guide to property taxes. These were a couple FAQs on there from a couple of years ago. Again, the link's still there. Why property taxes, and how does your county appraisal affect your taxes? Because your value, as it tells in here, what changes, it all depends on the mill rates too. So, what happens with tax mill rates and your property value go hand in hand about what happens. So one doesn't necessarily predict the other, but that's just kind of how they explain that. This same thing is out there where you can go in and calculate your own taxes, and I think this is helpful. People should know how taxes work and how it works on their house. General fund has an exemption, and if you remember that changed legislatively, it was $40,000, it's now $75,000. This document, I couldn't find one updated at the $75,000, but the 40, you took it times the 11.5%, because that's the residential rate, gets you your assessed value times the mill levy divided by 1,000, that'll tell you the amount of your tax. So at $40,000, the exemption, it was $92. Now that that's up to $75,000, I added the math down there, times the 11.5%, times the 20 mils divided by 1,000, it's $172 exemption for general fund. So it's about an $80 increase, and I think legislatively, that's about the math we've talked about here last year sometime, I think that was. So anyway, that's the exemption. Assessment classes, again, this is for any entity, not just 368. Residential, 11.5%. Agricultural land is taxed at 30%. Commercial is somewhere down below, if I'm looking here. Gotta go over here where I can see where that is.
25%.
Yeah, commercial, 25%. So again, that's that top part of your notice. This is another tool that's out there on KSDE, how to calculate your taxes. This is updated with the $75,000 exemption. So you take that off the value of your house times 11.5% if it's residential, times 20 mils general fund, and then all other funds depends on your mill levy. This is an example, and you can't see the very bottom there. I pull that down by yanking the whole screen down. So you'll be able to see it online. Then again, the reason I show things in residential, this is the breakdown in Miami County. 73% of the assessed value of the county is generated from residential property. Hence why we typically show that. And again, if you want to talk about taxes and economic development, this shows you we're heavy in rooftops. Commercial obviously pay more, so an economic development spend. And if you have more commercial businesses paying higher taxes, that may help alleviate residential. But we are heavy in homes, and so 73% of the total tax revenue is generated off residences. Assessed value impacts. We talk about this every year, and I think there's a few key things that I hope people will walk away from listening to presentations. One is assessed value and what that does to a district's relative wealth. And again, it sounds like a broken record every year, but as our assessed value of our district goes up, and if our students are about the same, which they have been, then we are more wealthy than we were the year before. So they take your assessed value, divide it by your number of pupils, and that gets you an assessed value per pupil. And when that increases relative to the rest of the state, you are more wealthy and you lose state aid. So there's the citation there if you want to go and read the formula. It's 1% for every 1,000, but the median is a lengthy formula, but that's the essence of it. So, when our property values go up, it can cost us state aid, which has been happening and is happening again this year. So again, state aid changes percentages. We get state aid on our local option budget. That was 23.89%. It's now going to be 17.83%. We're losing 6% state aid. So just for comparison, again, we're talking about the 25-26 budget, but 22-23, just a few years ago, that was 33%. So we went from 33 to 23 to 18. That's a pretty good decrease. Capital outlay and bond and interest, we were getting 9%, we've been getting 0. So there is no state aid. And again, that is a shift from state aid to local taxpayers. I mean, there's no way around it. That is by design how the formula works at the state level, and when the state aid goes down, our budget is state, local, and federal. So one goes down, the other backfills. So you'll see that here numerically next. On the LOB, that's the local option budget from last year. So I left it the same. That will not be what the LOB is for 26. You'll see that later and more in August. But we were at 23%, so we got $1.2 million of state aid on that LOB. Now at the lower amount, it's only $917,000 and change. So that's a $312,000 decrease. Not getting that from the state, LOB stays the same, more of it's coming local. Local taxpayers are paying a higher share because of our assessed value. And that's just the way the state formula works. Obviously, if the state were to change the formula, there's a huge price tag to that. That would be a big legislative change with a high dollar amount. So could that change? Yes. Will it? Probably not very likely, because there would be winners and losers. But for what's happening to our district and our assessed valuation, we continue to lose state aid every year. That's a pretty significant amount of money. Hence why, and I meant to say this earlier when I said about preliminary not being short. A lot of this that I'm covering tonight will address the next 4 action items, so I won't talk nearly as much when we get to those. This is covering a lot of things. And this is segued into, because one of the items later, we're going to talk about the cost of living and the election coming up on that. This is, again, a reason why that cost of living is important, because of that continued loss of revenue. We'll talk more about that later tonight, and more about that in August too, and in the months to come leading up to the election for that. But again, that's a key component that I want people to walk away with and understand why we would even ask for something like that, because of this trend. And I'll share more in August. I show a linear history. And at 300,000, I don't remember the number off the top of my head last year, equivalent to that. You go back 4 or 5 years, it's over $1 million that we lost in state aid. That's a lot to make up, and that's been some of that shift that I talk about. Budget outlook for next year. So again, I've shared this with the board previously. The general fund increase, that's available out there on KSD's website publicly. That's what our general fund's expected increase, and that's because of the base state aid that the legislature appropriated more money for, as they do every year. It's tied loosely, I guess I could say, to inflation, if that'd be a fair, easy statement. So we do get some increases from the legislature, so we're very grateful and thankful for that. When general fund goes up, our LOB is always 33% of that, so they go tandem, hand in hand. One goes up, the other goes up, one goes down, the other goes down. So 33% of that is here. That gives us $495,000 increased budget for next year. Now again, I already mentioned, we're losing that state aid. So if you think about our state aid change, this is not all state aid because it's local, but there's a part of it. So this is kind of budget change. So we're getting $500,000. We're losing this as far as not losing it, but it's a shift from state aid to local taxpayers. So that nets out $183,000. This will be the budget change next year. So increase in costs, and again, I have this budget slide in here every year, and I put some of the big rocks out there, and you'll hear much more about this in August. So that's why I put in red, partial list. Salaries and benefit increases for next year for all of our staff, about $648,000. We have a special assessment from the co-op, the Special Education Cooperative, for our special ed services. For our district next year, and we'll share more information about this in the budget, but that assessment's going up $295,000. That's a pretty significant increase when there's not that much more special ed funding next year. I think it was $10 million put in statewide. So again, we spend more on special ed than we get state aid. This is going to make that deficit, I guess, if you will, even more. So again, you'll hear more about that later. Part of that includes a lot of our staff, special ed teachers and things. So I would say a good half of that could be just raises and benefits for them as well. The other is increased cost of the co-op special ed services as a whole. A lot of the things are expensive delivery models, and those costs, like everything, keep going up. So that $300,000 is significant. That will be something we have to account for. Bus contract has a 3% annual increase in it. That's about $38,000-ish. And then LOB, that's that $5 million number. Even if you just say 3%, I think that's a fairly conservative number for inflation, $154,000. So remember last month, property insurance was going up $62,000, work comp was going up $32,000. That's $93,000, quick math, of the $154, not counting anything else that we buy out of LOB that's going to go up. It seems to be, I can't think of anything that's going down in cost. But so I think that's, again, I say partial list, but you total just those big rocks up, that's $1.1 million of increase in costs against $495,000 of new revenue. So twofold higher. Hence, again, why we were considering cost of living to balance that equation out. We'll talk a little more about cost of living in a moment. Again, the revenue neutral rate, this is a snip of what the county provides to us. These are our actual mill rates, and this is what they give us for revenue neutral. General fund, which they always have to calculate and tell you that, you can't do that anyway. By state law, you have to levy 20 mills, but they have to tell you what it really is. But you'll see later, there's two different numbers. There's including general fund and excluding general fund, because we can't do that unless you want to break state law, which I don't recommend. Capital outlay, we levy 8 mills, the revenue neutral 7.62. All other, which again is LOB and bond and interest, 19 mills. So you total those three up, that's our revenue neutral rate, 45.58 mills. So again, the 19 is just the all other funds, LOB and bond and interest. That was 48.7 last year, but this year 45.58, that was our actual mill levy. I'll do the math for you in a moment, but you can see the difference there, what to be revenue neutral, what that has to look like. This is a part of the Code 99 that we honestly don't have to do. I put it up here just for illustration purposes, because this section is only if you're exceeding revenue neutral. And again, we're not. We're revenue neutral, or the term that I've coined, we're revenue negative, because neutral would be the same. We're lowering taxes. And so this, while we don't need it, the nice format shows you how much we levied last year. There's that same mill rate, $11.9 million in taxes. That carries over to this column. This is the proposed taxes under the new budget, 10.6 million, and the proposed mill levy of 43 mills. So 11.9 million was the taxes levied last year, 10.6, so that's about what, 1.3 million, rough math. And instead of 45 mills, 43 mills, so roughly 2.5 mills under revenue neutral. Now, excluding general fund, you get a little different number, which we'll show that again in a minute, but that's without the 20 mil general fund. Again, we can't do that even if we wanted to. So while revenue neutral, we have to levy 20 mils, so that's $4.5 million general fund versus 4.3 million revenue neutral, which you cannot do. The reason these are down here, if the only reason you're exceeding revenue neutral is because of general fund, you don't have to have the hearing because the law allows and knows that you can't meet that number. You have to levy 20 mils. So if everything else, other than that, you're considered revenue neutral. We're revenue neutral all the way across because of this total. In August, you'll have the final mill rates. This again is not completed yet, shouldn't be much change, but I always say it's pending because there could be minor tweaks as we work through the rest of the budget and actually get through it all in depth. This is kind of the comparison overall and hopefully a little bit of simpler chart. Again, the neutral, the preliminary, we'll do the final in August. 2.561 mills below revenue neutral, and these are the tax numbers, including general fund and excluding general fund. So take your pick which one you want to look at. We're either $1.2 million below or $1.5 million below. That's in addition to, or in excess of what last year I showed you that negative earlier. And this is because our bonds are paying off. And so later tonight, another agenda item I'm covering in the middle of all this is the early repayment on the bonds. So we'll talk more about that here in a moment too. Okay, so this is something that I stole from someone else, borrowed with their permission hopefully, but I think it's appropriate. Levies are for learning, bonds are for building. I used that during our bond issue that we ran, a couple attempts for a bond, to kind of distinguish why, if you want to run a bond issue, and sometimes that's a commentary of any school that's running a bond issue is, why don't you pay for that out of your budget? Well, I use the analogy of it's kind of like, why do you take out a home loan? Why don't you pay cash for a house? Same thing for a school. If you're running a $20 million bond, you can't pull $20 million out of your budget for those things. So anyway, we're not talking about bond tonight, but levies are for learning, that's your mill levy. Bonds are for building. Again, it's a mill levy, but I think that's a good way to think of it. So this is what we currently levy. So again, levies, general fund, local option budget, capital outlay, bond and interest. So that was last year. I just foreshadowed, bonds are paying off. That's going to go away. That's part of our big decrease and how we're so far into revenue neutral this year, aka revenue negative is the term I'm using. And the Rec Commission levied 1.185 mills last year, which flows through us. Not really us directly, but it is in our budget publication. Again, these are the things statutory. You have to levy a general fund. That's not a choice. Our local option budget was approved, a voter approved initially back in 2015, capital outlay in 2014. The last bond that passed successfully was in 2014, and the rec commission was approved by voters in 2021. So again, I think it's important to look at what do we not levy also. You've heard me talk in the past, until June 30th, when our adult ed program ended, we could have levied an adult ed mill levy to pay for that. Wouldn't be an option anymore because we no longer have an adult education program as of June 30th. Cost of living, again, we've been talking about that. That is on the agenda for later tonight and will be on the general election for voter input and voting on that. Special assessment is things, in the past we've had that, it's never been a very big levy, but a lot of that was when the city put in the trails around, that went by and they assessed all the neighboring property owners. I want to say there was maybe another crosswalk enhancement out here that we got an assessment for, so that's what that can be used for, if you have special assessments like that from a city or another entity. There's some others on the budget code, like library districts and other things that are not as common. I always think it's important to point out, schools cannot levy sales tax. A lot of taxing entities, cities and counties get sales tax money. We do not. Now, the state of Kansas, of course, does, which helps for the state aid part. But directly, sales tax does not come to schools. And the rec commission could levy up to 4 mills. That's the statute authority on that. So again, as I've said before, these can be utilized for future budgets. Like when we talked about cost of living. We could have done that this year and still been revenue neutral. What that looks like in the future, we'll talk more at a later date about that. But that would increase operating funds. And again, that's why I show you that budget outlook. The revenue and the expenses, you know, we're going to be living off cash for a little while, but at that $500,000 differential, how many years before that eats up millions of dollars of reserves, and then what does that financial picture look like? So that to me is going to be a critical thing for our district. Hence why there's more information on the cost of living. So again, I know there was confusion about the name. We don't pick the name. That's in the statute. We have no control over that. It's called cost of living authority. People think that means things like Social Security sometimes gets cost of living raised. Not all what this is about. But again, we don't pick the name, just like we don't pick the name local option budget. We don't pick the name. That's all defined in statute. But this has to do with the assessed value of your homes. And if you are in a high, this is the Jimmy summary of COLA, or cost of living. If your housing costs are high, the theory, why I think this is even an option, is because it's expensive to live in your community. And so if you're going to attract and retain staff to live and work in your community, you're going to have to pay them more because of the higher cost of housing. Even if they rent, they're going to have a higher cost of housing. So in turn, you may have to pay them more to be competitive. So there's the statute reference in there. For this year, there's 28 districts in Kansas that are eligible. So in Miami County, it's Palo and Lewisburg. Lewisburg has levied it for a couple of years now. In Johnson County, again, it's just because of the housing market. All the school districts in Johnson County are eligible as well, and they all levy it. So you have to be eligible every year. That can change, and the amount changes. So we've been eligible clear back to 18-19. Not very much. That was very small, very small, very small. 21-22, we wouldn't have been eligible anyway. 1%, 2%, 3.25%. This next year is 2.7%. What does that mean? It's that percentage of your general fund that you can levy because of that high cost, knowing that your salary costs are probably going to need to be higher to be competitive. So for us, for this next year budget, at 2.7%, that would have been an additional $450,000 of operating revenue for the school district. It would have equated to about a 1.7 mil increase. We still could have done all that and been revenue neutral, even revenue negative. But this was protested, so now it goes to an election in November. So again, this is to help inform as people start thinking about that already. We want people to be informed, make their own decision, but be armed with accurate information to make their own decision. Hence, all of these things. So that is the cost of living. This was an old slide, note the date 23-24, that I found. This biggest U.S. cities, again, the citations there, ran a story about, it ranked all the median home values by county. So much of this slice and dice a different way, but so to me, it's just the concept that Miami County was 4th, Johnson County was 1. The amounts, when on the next one I'll show you, because this company hasn't updated this. I tried to find it new for this year, so it'll be apples to apples, because people do different methodologies in their surveys. So when you can't find a source, who do you ask? Google. So go to Google and AI and type in highest median home values in Kansas by county. It doesn't really give you a comprehensive list, like from high to low, but it says the Kansas County with the highest median home value is Johnson County with a median value of $429,000 and change. A little more about Johnson County. Several other counties in Kansas have high median home values. Look at number 1, Miami County. So again, just shows the reason why we're eligible and why that's even an option for us in Lewisburg. And again, they've been levying it for a while. Okay, comparative data. I should take a break and take a drink, but do you have any questions yet? Okay, a closer look, and I promise this part goes a little bit faster. But more about mill rates. So this, again, citations there, KSD, the data warehouse is a lot of great information. If you ever really want to dive deeper, there's a lot of great information out there. This is a whole spreadsheet. I've cut the headers off just because that's irrelevant. This is the state averages. General fund, of course, as I said, everybody has to do 20 mills. So the average is 20 mills. Supplemental general, there are some districts that levy that adult ed levy that I talked about. 0.4 mills. Capital outlay, you can levy up to 8 mills, the state average is 7.4. Cost of living of the districts that levy it, it averages about 2.4. Again, ours would have been 1.7. Special liability is a whole other fund that I didn't mention earlier, like extraordinary growth, doesn't apply to us. Bond and interest, we're going to be at 0. There's history museum, public library, those are some of those others I said on code 1. Rec commission and rec benefits we have here, and other. So that's again the total. This is the state average. If you run that spreadsheet, was 53.3 mills. The lowest mill rate was 23 mills. That's Fort Leavenworth, and that's the same as the year before. The highest, all the way up to 79 mills. Caldwell, I think that's Sumner County, I think. That's changed over the last year, but the other one was in the 70s too. So it's 286 school districts in Kansas. Our mill levy last year, we would have been number 223. So the lower, the better, as far as your mill levy. So we had been 172nd. With our mill levy decrease last year, we dropped to 223rd out of 286. So what, 63 would have been lower than us? Now, this part's a little bit, not really conjecture, but knowing what our mill levy is going to do this year and the decrease, if we would have had that mill levy last year, what we're proposing tonight, we would have been 268th in the state. Only 18 districts would have a lower mill levy than us. I think that's a good thing, and that's, again, another major takeaway that I want district patrons to know. And that's why I show every year comparing us to other school districts, not only in Miami County, but the state. Because that shows what we are doing for taxpayers. When everyone talks about taxes and assessment, I think you have to take that all into account and look at all the entities. But the Palo School District, there were only 18 districts with a lower mill levy than us. I think that's pretty interesting. Again, this is every school that gets tax money from Miami County. This is on the Miami County Clerk's website. I've summarized it. You can get all the details out there. A lot of times when you think of Miami County, you think of big cities, Oswego, Palo, Lewisburg as the school districts. Really, all of these touch Miami County. Spring Hill has a section of Miami County. Gardner Edgerton does, Blue Valley does, Wellsville does, and Prairie View does. So out of the schools that get tax money from Miami County, last year we were second lowest. We had kind of horse traded a little bit with Lewisburg, and then we were lower than them last year. So again, that was as of last year. And again, this year, what our mill levy is going to do, we're going to be pretty darn close, if not below Prairie View. And the thing about Prairie View, they have a power plant. So district size, a lot different than Paola, but assessed value is very comparable because the power plant has a huge assessed valuation. So it makes a big difference in the tax base. Kind of like Burnham, they have a nuclear power plant, where this one's coal-fired. But anyway, we will come close to that this year. You'll see that in a minute. Okay, Some of this is just general, we'll talk more about it, but a lot of this is just kind of school finance 101, how mill levies work. General fund, again, I've talked about, that 20 mil has been extended through 25, 26, and 26, 27. The legislature has to reauthorize that at certain intervals, and so that will be coming up again. They did change the deduction to that 75,000. This is some history, even though this isn't updated, but years ago, it was a whole lot more than 20 mils. Back in the 90s, that was in the 30-some mil, and then the state legislature cut it down. There's some of the history there if you want to read that. Again, if you exceed just because of 20 mils, you're considered revenue neutral. We're revenue neutral all the way around. The other levy fund we're going to talk about, local option budget, supplemental general, LOB, local option budget, it's all the same thing. Again, we don't pick the names, that's what it's called in statute. So again, sometimes there's a lot, it's alphabet soup at times. But again, similar to general fund, the state average is 32%. You can go by resolution up to 33% or by district voters. Ours was district voter approved at an election May of 2015. If any cash balance lowers down the next year's mill levy, the base state aid for LOB is different than general fund. That's kind of getting into some technicalities, but important to note for some folks. Capital outlay is the third levy fund we're going to talk about. You can levy up to 8 mils, has to be spent for capital projects, cannot be used for operating, meaning you can't pay salaries out of this. There's restrictions on what you can't spend. A lot of times schools build up cash balancing in for projects or facility needs. For us, without a bond issue pending, this is how we're maintaining and taking care of our facilities. So again, my commentary there about capital outlay. That's the statute, that's our resolution that was passed. Bond and interest. Again, that's the fourth levy fund and the last one we're going to talk about tonight. The revenue, how it's generated, it's for payment of principal and interest on bonds. We lost our state aid because of all that calculation from 2024 and beyond. Actually, that's everybody, or that was for us. Our bonds mature September 1st, 2028, 3 years from now. We are actually going to, one of the agenda items tonight, we're going to pay those off with our September 1st, 2025 payment. So we will be debt-free and done. That bond and interest mill levy this year will be 0, had been 5.69. Again, that's part of that revenue neutral revenue negative. This is just the bond amortization. You can see it down there highlighted. That's when they would have matured. We're going to take action later tonight. With your approval, pay those off early, which will be a good savings for taxpayers as well and lower that mill rate down. This is not final yet. I mean, the beginning balance is correct known. The budgeted revenue, I got to work through the budget. As I note down here, sometimes shutting that off because of delinquent taxes and things come in for years after. Like even now, there's money already paid that was after the cutoff date that the county hasn't sent to us, and we're going to get. So there could be some more revenue. That's budgeted right now. I haven't worked that whole code. That could change. I might have that a little more refined by August. Point is, this is the payoff. So we have $5.3 million in that fund right now. Our payoff is $4.4 million. We have enough money to pay the bonds off, so we're going to do that. Again, you have to give legal notice to the bond market and to the bond holders that you're going to pay them off early. That's the resolution that we're going to talk about later tonight. One of the 4 that we covered in all of this one shot. So anyway, that again, the mill levy will be 0, and we'll make that final payment September of 2025.
How much is that saving in interest?
Good question. So if you look back here, so September of 2025, I didn't include that in. So it's really these items here. So it would be the March of 26, the September and March of the next year. Now we were getting close anyway. You see these, I mean, where these are some larger numbers. These, there's not much left down there. So that interest savings is small. That total, I've got that over in front of me, it's about $76,000.
Still a good amount.
Yeah. Really, to me, I mean, the interest savings, that's great too, but that mill levy decrease is the huge part. That's, and you'll see later on my summary what that's going to save local taxpayers. So, yeah, when I go back over there, I can tell you the full, but around $76,000. It's those right there added up. Board goals, that's just in there every year. You guys approve that. This is good through 2026. It's always good to look at the goals for budget, facilities, curriculum, because all this is how we're funding the board goals. So I think that's always appropriate to have in there. Building needs assessment, we talked about that last month. Dr. Tammy Thomason covered all that. right prior to her retirement. So you've got all those documents out there, all the needs assessments are out there on board docs for last month's agenda. This was the consolidated kind of collection of all that Michelle signed, that's available out there as well, will be part of the website. The state assessment review is part of that. You have to look at state assessment scores, and remember Tammy told you that those aren't out yet, but you'll see those later on. I'm sure Amy will cover those at some point in time when they're out later in the fall. This again was some snips of Tammy's presentation, the resources and actions, the barriers identified. That was her header screen, just all the different things. So I just put that out there as to demonstrate that we did cover that last month. It needs to be part of your budget even in July. So you'll see some of this again in August. It's just a refresher and a reminder that we did cover that. Okay, so this is the overall summary. Again, the neutral rates, the preliminary rates that we're proposing, the taxes to be levied, and again, that mill levy. We're 2.5 mils below revenue neutral, AKA, as Jimmy's calling it, revenue negative, by the tune of those dollar amounts, whether you include or exclude general fund, because it shows it two different ways. This is the total. So the 11.9 million will levy roughly 20.6. It's estimated, because obviously that changes a lot. Haven't worked all the budget. We'll have all that done and nailed down. There still can be changes based on final assessed value, if people appeal their valuations, or if there's any kind of housing improvement abatement programs that like the city has for home improvements and things. Those come later, but usually it's not a very significant, hence why it's estimated, because I don't want you to think that's an exact, that number can and will change. Just like the mill levies fluctuate a little bit. We do a final mill levy later in the year, telling you exactly what it ends up being. When you're down to the thousandths of a mill, it will change. So, tonight, this is what we're doing. We're asking you to approve the notice of revenue neutral intent. You have two options. It's yes, we intend to exceed revenue neutral, and what our proposed mill rate would be, and when we were having a hearing. We're not proposing to do that. So this option is checked, says no, we do not plan to exceed the revenue neutral, and we will submit our budget to the county clerk on or before October 1st, 2025. So doing and approving this, we will not need to have a revenue neutral hearing. We will still have a budget hearing, as all entities do. That will be in August, but we are not exceeding revenue neutral. So I think that is a good one. So again, this is another action item later. Once I get it all complete, and Matt and I take it to Topeka and KSDE reviews it, which, by the way, they've reviewed the preliminary, as has Laura Epp, the county clerk. Because really, it's your county clerk that is the be-all, end-all decision maker of if you're revenue neutral or not, if you meet it. And I know they have state guidance and things, but I always want to, in the past, work with Janet White on that as well, to make sure that they agree. It's pretty obvious this year. We're not even close. We're way below revenue neutral. So this is what our levy will look like. The bond and interest fund is gone, so instead of 4 levied funds, we're only going to have 3. So really, general fund is required by state law. This is our part, 23 mils. So again, that's at 43 mils, where I said if we had that mill levy last year, there were only been 18 school districts with a lower mill levy than us. So I think that's very telling about what our budget looks like in terms of the rest of the state. And when you think about taxes we're paying at 43 mils versus, you saw the other one at 79 was the high. And you see all the other schools in Miami County where they staff up the payroll at none even close to 43. So again, that's the same calendar. Questions?
The LOB is based off of the general fund, correct? Or is it based off the general fund and capital outlay?
Only general fund.
Okay, because I was looking through it if, with, I don't know if it would probably cause the revenue neutral hearing or not, but if you did go up to the 33%, it would allow you to lower the lower the capital outlay slightly, and then you get about a $30,000 increase from state aid.
This actually, the budget that I have in here is LOB at 33%.
Okay, I understand.
Now, if you're catching the 32 in there, that's the state average.
Okay.
Ours is built on 33%.
Okay, I was going to have the number that you sent me in an email one day.
No, I think that was the state average.
Okay,
I
that's
think is what you
probably
would
it.
ask me for. But yeah, we levied 33% LOB last year, and this is built on 33% again.
Okay, so you'll get the full amount possible of the percentage of state aid that we get
Correct.
based off of that?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
yes. But you're right, if we were the state average, 32, you could raise up to 33 and lower your capital outlay down, because we don't get any state aid on capital outlay. so we keep it neutral to taxpayers, but, you know, we are at 32%.
Perfect.
And that's what I always say is, you know, general fund is based on our head count, as you heard me say, that there's not a whole lot we can do to control that. We get what our enrollment is. We can't go any higher on LOE, even if the public said, hey, we'll pay more, unless the state law changed and you have an election, it's not a possibility. That's just like capital outlay, can't go any higher. There's maximums in there. There's no more additional revenue available to us. Hence again, why the cost of living we talked about for years leading up to, never levied it because it would have been an overall increase. But now that the bonds are paying off, it was the right time to consider that. But again, that is a revenue source when we don't have very many revenue sources available. So all in all, I think hopefully that's the things people leave with, an understanding how the state aid works and what our mill rate looks like compared to other schools and other taxing entities who may or may not have been revenue neutral. So there'll be more time for questions later during the action items, and then of course,
Oh, did we
again in
receive
August.
federal funding?
Federal funding, that's kind of an interesting one. There have been some movements in that. There's actually a webinar this Wednesday about that. There are some projections that KSD has shared, not like budget presentation out there, or projections are out there publicly. They've not posted that one out there. We have some early indications of what that is. There's a webinar Wednesday, but even today, I was reading there's been about 20 states that have filed a suit against the federal government to try to block that. So I think it's a lot up in the air. We'll know more after that webinar on Wednesday that I know Nat and I think Amy and I were all going to listen in on. But definitely there's potential there to lose some federal funding as well.
If it was to hold the way it is right now, this includes, there's a few $1,000s for Holy Trinity money included because it flows through us. So total, including that, would be 58,000 roughly. So maybe, you know, about 55 for 368, about 2 to 3 for goes through us for Holy Trinity training and stuff.
And that interest savings for bonds, $73,037. Not bad from memory. But I want to set the record back with that. So yeah, more to come on the federal. Definitely that, I didn't put that on my slides, that was kind of late breaking and new, but obviously if there's another 50-some thousand, that changes that picture.
You can keep us updated if something comes in a hard number.
Yeah.
We should just be
Definitely,
prepared.
and I think eventually, maybe after Wednesday, you know, KSD, normally like our budget projections, those are available publicly, as our title budgets are out there now. I'm sure eventually they'll post that on the school finance website. So
I know
they,
some school districts had hard numbers, but
yeah, we've all had it internally, they just haven't released it statewide publicly yet.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, next is open forum. Just as a reminder, each person speaking is not to exceed 5 minutes. Patrons are advised by the board members to not entertain questions or discussion that will take, and no action will be taken. According to Kansas law, the board shall not hear personal complaints concerning any employee or groups of employees of the school district or any person connected with the school district during open session. Matters relating to security of the board, the school buildings or facilities, or information system of the school, and other topics defined in Part KSA 754319. We have one speaker, Scott Chappelle.
I'm Scott Chappelle, and I'm speaking tonight because the board's handling of the Safe Zone signs raises serious concerns, not only about the decision itself, but about how and when it was made. Here's the timeline. In January 2023, the board adopted policy IFA, which governs classroom displays. That policy states employees may not use classrooms for the posting of a display of materials to promote or convey a political, religious, or personal message. Materials or displays that do not meet these not meeting these criteria are subject to removal by the principal. Not the superintendent, the principal. That's the process outlined in the policy. In January 2024, 4 new board members who campaigned together as a block on promises to rebuild trust and put students first were seated. I'll remind everyone, this was the same block of candidates promoted these political ads paid for by Samantha for USD368 and the Miami County GOP. But here's what happened. They waited nearly a year until November 2024 to bring up the safe zone signs, and they did it in open session where students, parents, and teachers couldn't witness. Instead, they raised the issue in a closed executive session during Superintendent Meek's evaluation and directed him to have the signs removed. This raises two questions. First, if the safe zone signs were such a clear violation of policy and required prompt attention, why wait almost a year to bring it up? And second, since the board doesn't directly review principals and the remedy in IFA is for the principal to act, was it even proper to evaluate the superintendent on this matter at all? In January, Superintendent Meek wrote in his Friday notes, quote, "How the decision was made by the board to have the signs removed in executive session was a gray area, and said he preferred not to risk an open records request. In April, he wrote, I believe it can be argued from both sides whether the safe zone signs are political. In other words, this wasn't a clear-cut violation. It was an interpretation this board chose to make behind closed doors, and not in open forum directed to the appropriate person, the principal. And that brings me to the question of neutrality and double standards. If neutrality is the goal, then neutrality must apply across the board. If safe zone signs violate neutrality, how is it neutral for board members to display political imagery on personal items like laptops during public meetings? The answer seems to be neutrality is only applied to viewpoints some people want to silence. That is selective enforcement, and it is against the law. And here's the reality. There was no disruption to the learning environment from those signs. The disruption came from this board, the adults in this room, who decided that a visible sign of support for vulnerable students was political. You keep claiming the schools are already safe for every student, but how can you make that claim when month after month students at these meetings tell you they're not? Is that putting students first? It certainly doesn't seem like you're even listening to them. You didn't just take away the signs, you took away trust, something the bloc ran on rebuilding. The partisan way you campaigned for a nonpartisan position destroyed trust. The way you are playing politics in our school system destroys trust. The safe zone signs were not political propaganda. They were quiet signals to vulnerable students that they had an adult they could trust in their school building if they needed one. If your goal was truly to make all students feel safe, this decision and the way it was made and executed did the opposite. The board's own policy laid out a process. The principal is to act. Instead, this board bypassed that process. You chose to make the decision in a closed meeting, tying it to the superintendent's job performance, and then you stated there will be no further comment. But students haven't stopped talking about it, and teachers haven't stopped talking about it, and the community is watching to see whether the board will apply policies fairly or only when it serves its own political agenda. When students see board members themselves displaying political imagery in public meetings while demanding neutrality from teachers, they notice. Everyone notices. We teach debate in our schools for a reason, because good citizens engage ideas openly and respectfully. If your conscience is clear, then open the doors. Defend decision in the light of day. If you can't, perhaps it's because deep down you know this wasn't about policy. It was about politics. Don't say there will be no further comment and expect the conversation to end, because this isn't ending.
All right, next, we, up for action items, approving the notice of revenue neutral rate intent.
All right, so I just made that preliminary, not short presentation. But this is the time when that slide in there, that direction back to the county clerk, which again, the preliminary is on KSDE, and Laura, county clerk, has agreed that it meets the revenue neutral, the revenue negative, as I've been calling it, the revenue neutral definition. So if you approve, this is what I will send back to her, which is in board docs available, public content. That's the notice of intent.
Okay, any questions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve notice of revenue neutral rate.
All those in favor? 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, approve 2025-26 budget publication.
And the budget publication, as I have that slide in there, once I get everything worked through and done, then Amanda, as the board president, will get to sign that notice with me. So this is just, some districts don't do this step. I think this is the right thing, so that you approve the publication. Some don't, just have their hearing, and you can make changes then, but I think this is a better way to do it. But again, I showed those mill rates. All we're going to publish is the general fund, the LOB, and the capital outlay. So that will be the estimated mill rates. And once I get all the budget work, we get to Topeka next Wednesday, probably in the paper July 30th, and then we would have the hearing August 11th, board meeting. So we'll need your signature at some point on that. There's 2 codes that have to be signed for the paper. So
Okay.
this is approving the publication as well.
Any questions? Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
All right. Approving the cost of living resolution.
Yeah, and the cost of living, so again, I told you that was a long presentation, but I covered 4 agenda items all at once. So, but the cost of living, the resolution that's out there, this is basically what we had the bond counsel or the legal counsel help us with that does the work on our bonds. And this is setting the language and the resolution calling for that election. So it's pretty simplistic, but this is what we will sign and send to the county, and that will be the language that will be used on the ballot.
Okay. Any questions? Need a motion to approve the cost of living resolution.
I motion to approve the cost of living resolution.
Second.
All those in favor? All opposed? Did you vote?
No,
Okay.
just based on language.
Okay.
Thank you.
Approving the resolution authorizing early redemption of outstanding series 2014, 2016, and 2017 bonds.
And same thing in there, that one, I'm clicking over to it in board docs. The redemption resolution is out there. Again, same bond counsel advisor prepared that. And so even though we have the cash, you'll see we'll have a code 62 as bond and interest budget. Even if you don't need to levy money, you still have to have the budget authority to spend your own cash. So you'll still see that budget, and it'll be in the budget for at least 3 more years, I guarantee you, by the time all that rolls out. Because we showed the 2-year prior and the 1-year budget, so it'll be around for a while, but there will not be anything additional levied. But this notice tells the bond holders, the people that actually own those bonds, and the bond market, that we are redeeming them and paying them off. And so that will be, and it tells the Kansas Treasurer's Office, because they're the ones that facilitate the payment, that we're going to pay in full more than just that September 125 amount. And the good thing is about that, we will be debt-free. Again, I alluded to, we have to think about how we're going to do our facilities, whether we're going to do something in the future. Otherwise, cost of living, capital outlay is our only option. Cost of living would be too, but capital outlay is for facilities and capital type projects. So this will notify the bond market, the bond holder. Where I was going with that was saying we will no longer have to do those bond disclosures. We're in the middle of our CPA audit this week. Then normally you'll see that audit later in probably October. There's normally those bond disclosures. We won't have to do those anymore because you don't have to report to the bond market because there is no bond out there because we're going to pay them off. So simplistic a little bit, sort of.
Okay, questions on this approval of resolution? Need a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing early redemption of outstanding Series 2014, Series 2016, and Series 2017 bonds.
Who seconded?
Sean. All those in favor? 7.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yes,
Well,
thank you
good.
for all your work.
I'll be quiet the rest of the meeting. No problem. Well, maybe.
Enjoy your Coke Zero.
Yeah.
Okay, final action item, adopting the KASB policy updates, BBC, CN, DFE, DFH, GAACB, IB, JBC, JBCD, JGFGB, JH, I'm not done, KBC, KGB, KM, and KN. Matt?
Mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
So most of these are the result of statute changes to be in compliance with statute changes. Wow, that's a mouthful. I guess a lot of letters. And so, however, with that said, there are some, as they go through these, they go through and try to look at updating policy language as they're going through others. So, for instance, DFE would be the investment of funds to stay in compliance with stuff. DFH, however, doesn't have to. I am recommending this because this policy, we've added some additional language or verbiage regarding summer camps. Summer camps are not actually a fundraiser, and the school's not involved with that. And so we added some language at the end just to clarify that, just to make it to where it's easier, less confusion. Another one was IB. IB does not have to be approved. However, I am making the recommendation that we approve this because of some statute changes. Whenever the board appoints board members to be part of a committee, depending on the number of board members on it, it could be subject to Open Meetings Act, which isn't a bad thing for and so forth. But this is specifically with site councils. So each of our buildings have site councils, and so we don't always have board member representation on that. We've had it approved by the board just kind of as a formality type piece. However, I can't appoint that. And so if I appoint it and say, hey, is there someone that wants to be on this, then it wouldn't be subject to open records. Not because we're trying to skirt anything, it's because then you have to publish it, and then you have that other stuff. It becomes burdensome for the buildings. If someone wants to go to a site council meeting, then by all means, we welcome that.
So I have a question.
Yes.
If we would create like a bond board to review like ideas for a bond, would those appointments only be through you then?
Well, it could be, but doesn't have to be. So for instance, negotiations, you guys appoint that. Those are already open meetings. We already treat that as open meetings, but that would be an example. An example to foreshadow a little bit, because of looking at enrollment situations, and as we at the elementary level, we can adjust enrollments, staffing for enrollment a little bit easier as we get into the middle school and high school because of electives and so forth. So some of our smaller classes are starting to hit the secondary level. We need to have kind of a roadmap, if you will. And so one of the things that I'm going to do this year, I'm just going to call it a work group or a focus group, whatever, a committee for staff and people to start looking at that. I will appoint that. I will ask if there's a board member or two that would like to be on it, kind of brainstorm, this is what we're looking at. But I appoint that because that's my work. And so that's kind of what a site council is. It's the principal's work group to get recommendations and so forth that then gets shared beyond. So that's the difference. If the board decided later that they want to create a committee and have, say 3 members, couldn't be 4 because it would then be a special meeting, then that would be subject to that. If I, so that would probably be the easiest. Does that make sense?
I have a question on fundraising.
Yes.
So summer athletic camps are not considered fundraisers. What are they considered?
That is that's the money goes to the coaches, so they the t-shirts, the stuff, if they have extra money, then they can pay their coaches with it. Most of them will put some money back into like buying some equipment or some basketball, say if it's basketball, like some basketballs and stuff. But that money does not come to us.
Okay. I just, as a parent, feel super uncomfortable like Venmoing them directly.
I
get that
and I wouldn't do it. I mean, that's why. I mean, I I don't have it, so
Right, well,
I still get the check out or what
but
have
I
you,
mean,
so.
that's how a lot of them are set up, so.
Doesn't have to, I mean, you can still pay for, I mean, they have that as an option, but yeah,
But-
it's not, it's,
And as you see in the policies, our district policy is we do not use Venmo,
Correct.
PayPal.
That's why I'm just
We
confused.
use the
as-
IC store, but
Yes.
those are not school.
Sure, but if they're not school and we're Venmoing and our policy says that we can't Venmo, why are we putting the school logo and the school name on them? I mean, because I hear from students that are under the impression if you don't come to these camps, you don't play. Not that they tell you you can't play, but you can be on the team with the kids who are gonna come to camps, or the ones who are, it just is a little misleading. Does that make sense?
yeah. And hence why I'm trying to clarify, just to publicly say
Right.
that these are not school affiliated. The money doesn't run through us. I don't, as a district, we don't set the cost. The one thing that we do allow, or I shouldn't say allow, they use facilities, but they purchase accident insurance. And so the accident insurance, because I think it's like $3
Something like that.
a participant or whatever, they will actually reimburse, they will pay the district, which then we will pay that based on the number of people.
But so, I mean, as a parent, if I don't pay them through Venmo, I mean, you would have to do cash or check, which still is made out to, directly to the coaches.
That's correct.
Theirs are not part of the activity fund accounts. They have their own bank accounts. It's
Right.
not under our tax ID, with no control.
But I'm saying if it's presented as a school camp, because that's the way it's presented.
And that's why, like, a couple of them that I caught or asked, and I said, hey, you need to put on this right now that it's not sponsored by, it's not a USD368 sponsored, and something that we need to clean up. This is the first step in trying to clean some of that up.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I guess there's two ways to look at it. One is when they say, you know, that it's gonna be put on by coaches of, you know, the high school or middle school or whatever. There's a piece that then ties that, you know, I think by default with the school, but then there's another piece that says, well, you know, we do work with kids. You know, this is so we, I guess, know what we're doing, if that makes sense.
Possible to go like next meeting and do it under the facilities portion of it, to make sure that if anything goes on within the facilities, that there is noted that it is not actually a school activity, but whoever's putting the activity on is clearly stated within any advertisement. I think that would solve a little bit of that problem.
Hold on, I didn't follow the first, when we talk, what with facilities?
It's
I
like
lost you.
facilities, because that's part of under the policies. There's like, it's not in this policy, I'm just talking about next time. I think the issue is a bigger issue than just this specific policy.
But we have our facility use policy.
Under that,
Okay,
could we maybe go with KSB and find the proper language to add to that next time to make sure that if it is not directly the school?
I would have to, I'll be honest with you, I'd have to look at the facility policy, because I'd have to brush up on that to see how that would work. I mean, I can do that.
Because I see the concern there. But I think that,
Absolutely, and by this isn't saying that there's anything wrong going on or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
It's just because there is
It's just misleading.
confusion,
Yeah.
or could be misleading
It's-
of what it is, and we don't have, I mean, we don't control as a district, the cost and so forth. I know majority of, you know, I do believe that some of them pay their coaches for their time for that camp, but then they'll put some money back into the program as well, but each one does a little bit different. KBC, is a policy. It's okay to adopt. It's not required. We do, just because we do live stream our regular board meetings. This was basically it's saying that if you live stream your board meeting, that you can't not live stream a portion of it because you want to be selective on what you show the public and not. So, I mean, that's not, I mean, we start streaming, we start, obviously when it's an executive session, we have a slide that goes on that says that, and we come back. The one piece for this is if there is a technical glitch, then, and we had one where we lost sound for something. I mean, that was a technical glitch, and so that's accounted for. We didn't do that on purpose. KGB would not be required. And this is a policy that has not been, that we previously don't have. The previous boards have not adopted. If the board prefers to have it, I mean, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just updating the understanding that person boards may legally record or live stream the open portion of board meetings, so it's adopted as an exception to our concealed observations policy. And then the last one that I would say is KN complaints. It's okay to adopt. It wouldn't have to. What it does is it changes the language describing a narrative that if somebody continues to have a complaint or brings a complaint up about, and it's been investigated, and the next person, brings it up, and, just that you can say, hey, we've already done our due diligence, and so you wouldn't have to have the same thing over and over. But, so that would be I'm okay with approving all of them. I don't see anything detrimental in the stuff, but I went through the others that I didn't mention need to be approved because of statute language changes to be in compliance.
Does anybody have any they would rather not approve? I move we adopt the KASB policy updates listed on paper.
Second.
All those in favor?
I want to read out this.
Okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Killing mission. All those in favor? 7-0. Thank you.